Hey y'all, it's Mamaw. Hopefully my internet will hold up again. This is the problem with living out in the rural areas of this country. We don't have stable internet, but we're going to give it a try. Anyway, if you're easily bored, you may not want to watch this section. But I've been getting a lot of posts and private messages on what Posse Comitatus Act is, and about them calling in National Guard troops into our cities. So we're going to have a little Mamaw civics lesson. And we're going to go to my favorite book, the U.S. Constitution. So in our U.S. Constitution, under Article 1, we're going to Section 8. I'm going to read you a little bit. And this is why Taco thinks he's allowed to do things he ain't allowed to do, and Congress needs to start doing the damn job. So under Section 8, it says, the Congress shall have the power to collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts, and to provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. And then it goes through how they collect taxes. But then what they can collect taxes for and what they're to do with their tax collection. It goes on to read, to promote the progress of science and useful arts. So how in the hell we got RFK in there? It defies logic, and that's against the Constitution if you really want to try to stretch it. It is the duty of Congress, to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and to make rules concerning captures on land and water. To raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for longer than a term of 2 years. They're to provide for the calling forth of the militia, to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Now, this is still under the duties of Congress. To provide for the organizing, arming, and discipline of the militia, and for governing such part of them may also be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively an appointment of officers and authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So now I will direct you to the amendments under the Bill of Rights. Amendment number 3, which was proposed in 1789 and ratified in 1791. No soldier shall, in a time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in a time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. So prior to us having our search and seizure laws and all, what this means is, for you ice gravy seals, pretenders, you can't just go knocking down a door and going in and staying and doing what the hell you want without the permission of the owner. That's what that means. So even though they don't have a warrant, they still don't have a right to knock down your door and go in your damn house. So, that's in our Constitution. But I also downloaded the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. And that is a federal law that limits the powers of federal government in using military personnel to enforce domestic policies, reflecting a commitment to keep the military and civilian authorities separate. So in other words, even though the Taco has got his little thin-skinned butthurt, he cannot use the military at his whim to go and enforce his will. I call it the big bludgeon. The Posse Comitatus Act, which is Section 18 of the Uniform Service Code 1385, was signed into law on June 18, 1878 by President Rutherford B. Hayes. It was enacted in an aftermath of the Reconstruction era, primarily to prevent the military from intervening in civilian law enforcement and to ensure that the military would not be used to enforce laws in the former Confederate states. The act originally applied only to the United States Army, but it was later expanded to include the Air Force in 1956 and more recently the Navy, Marine, and Space Force in 2021. The act prohibits the use of the Army or Air Force to execute the laws of the United States unless expressly authorized by the Constitution or an act of Congress. This means the military personnel cannot engage in civilian law enforcement activities such as making arrests or conducting searches, which goes back to Amendment number 3. They can't knock down your door and go in your house without permission. The act, however, does not apply to the National Guard. So keep in mind, Taco thinks he can deploy the regular military. He cannot. He has, but the generals who know a hell of a lot more than him and Pete Hegseth have defied that, said, no, we can't under Posse Comitatus. But the National Guard is a state militia. The National Guard, when operating under state authority, and who is the head of the state? That is the governor. So under the governor of that state's authority, the National Guard can be used for law enforcement actions. What we're getting into is that you're taking the governor, let's say Texas, of one state, thinking he is going to impose his militia on another state. You can't do that. Only the governor of that state can impose his own militia. What Taco's trying to do is to federalize the National Guard, and this is not a time of war, insurrection, nor emergency. And that's where they're playing around. The Posse Comitatus Act was the response to the military's role in enforcing Reconstruction policies, which were often seen as oppressive by the southern states. By limiting military involvement in civilian affairs, Congress aimed to protect civil liberties and prevent the military from being used as a tool of oppression against citizens. While the act imposes significant restrictions on military involvement in civilian law enforcement, there are exceptions. The president can authorize military action to suppress an insurrection, and that's why he keeps saying that. There is no insurrection, people. You are allowed to protest under the First Amendment. He is trying to say that our legal protests are an insurrection. That is not true. Please, whatever you do, do not become violent when you're out there protesting. No matter what they do, because he's got them gravy seals out there trying to egg people on so he can say there is truly an insurrection. Additionally, courts have upheld the Act's provisions, emphasizing the need to maintain a clear distinction between military and civilian authority. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 remains a significant legal framework in the United States, reflecting the nation's commitment to civil liberties and the separation of military and civilian powers. Its implications continue to be relevant in discussions about the appropriate role of the military in domestic affairs, especially in times of civil unrest. We don't have civil unrest. We are peacefully protesting. So, I'm just an old hillbilly girl. I'm an old grandma. I don't know a whole hell of a lot, but by golly, I can read. So, Taco, I know that you're trying to throw stink out on the shelf, but we ain't going to let you, because there's a bunch of us in this country that can read. We know that we have the full right and authority to protest, Don't care what Blondie Pam Bondi, the protector of pedophiles, is saying. And we are not in violation. You are violating the Posse Comitatus Act because you cannot send the military out there. And you governors, shame on you for sending your militia to another state. That's also covered in the Constitution because we're not supposed to have states battling each other, and that's exactly what you're doing. If the governor of the state of Illinois said, I don't want your people in my state, you do not have the right to send them there. And that's all Mamaw's got to say about that. I hope I didn't bore y'all, but I've had a lot of questions, and I promised you if you had any questions, I'd look stuff up. Yes, I did see that Qatar is putting in a military base in Idaho, and I never thought I would live to see the day that we allowed a foreign country to put a military installation on our soil for no damn reason. And I'm telling you what, that's what that airplane was about, that free airplane that's going to cost us $1 billion, and that man in the White House went and made this deal on a side job. And Qatar, the people that are financing a lot of this, no, this cannot happen. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm going to hop off of here. Remember, Sunday morning at 10 Eastern Time, we're going to have coffee with Mamaw, and I think you'll have fun. We're going to cover every week one of the 7 deadly sins, and our first one will be lust. Bye-bye.